that there are some countries where you don't encounter snakes at all. But before that, I would like to know, though I don't think anybody need to speak, as to whether any one of you or all of you have read this book, Frederick Forsyth's No Comebacks. It's an absolutely brilliant collection of short stories. It was published quite some time back, maybe decades ago, but very relevant even today. Very, I think, very much in print even now. It's a collection of about 10 short stories, is what I remember. No Comebacks is the title of one of the short stories, and it is also the title of the book. But I'm showing this only because there is one story in this book titled There Are No Snakes in Ireland. The story is fiction. The title is fact. There are really no snakes in Ireland. I feel that every medical student should read this book, and especially this story because it is so relevant to India. It's about an Indian student in Ireland who is subjected to some kind of racist, uh, taunts by an industrial crew where he's working, and it is a kind of a revenge story. It's a weird story. It's a bit of a strange story, but it is very fascinating. Like all the other stories, it's got a twist at the end. As I said, this title of this short story is absolutely true. There are no snakes in Ireland. So also Chile and Hawaii and Iceland and New Zealand. These are the countries where you don't encounter snakes. Don't ask me why. I'm not very sure. I'm not a herpetologist. There must be definitely some reason. And at the end of the lecture, if one of you or some of you know about the reason, you can definitely open up and let me know. But I've got a mnemonic for you. This is commonly asked in the examination. So there's a mnemonic to remember the countries where there are no snakes, and that is Chini, not China. I know China is very much in the news of late, so don't confuse that with this. This is CHINI, and this is something like an acronym, an abbreviation that you can read off as a word. Each letter standing for a country. C for Chile, H for Hawaii, I for Ireland, then New Zealand, and the other I for Iceland. So in Hindi, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, they call sugar chini. I know that it is chini, not chini, but fairly close enough for you to remember and recall the countries. In all other countries, in all other parts of the world, there are snakes, and the total number is about 3,000 current count. Maybe there will be more that will be discovered over a period of time. Venomous species only 500 to 550. Very important to remember that all snakes are not venomous. And look at Indian species, about 300 in total, and only about 50 to 55 are venomous. In other words, there's an important message on this slide. Almost all the snakes are actually non-venomous. There is only a small minority that is venomous. So don't look at snakes as your enemies. And that if you get bitten by a snake, you're going to, immediately get envenomed and, you're going to die, all these kinds of things. One has to, dispel from one's mind. Coming to myth number 2, and that is again a very widespread kind of belief, which is the incidence of snake bite in India follows the general pattern in the other countries. Look at how fallacious that myth is, or that piece of information is. The fact is that India records the highest annual incidence of total snake bites as well as fatal snake bites. What a terrible piece of statistic that is. That is something that we should not be proud of, even though we can say we are number one here. It is something which should make us hang our heads in shame. We need to address this and look at the statistics. I'll show you as to where India stands in relation to the other countries with regard to incidence of bites. Britain, just about 200 bites per year and 14 deaths in the last 100 years. Of course, one can say that Britain does not have too many venomous snakes, and that is the reason, and that is probably correct. But what about France? It has got quite a lot of species of snakes, 1,000 to 2,000 bites per year, only 2 to 5 deaths. Australia has got some of the most venomous snakes of the world. We'll come to that later. 3,000 bites on an average. Can you believe it? 0 to 5 deaths. There are some years where nothing is recorded as snake bite mortality. USA is a bit of a heavyweight, 6 to 8,000 bites per year, 5 to 15 deaths per year. And the heavyweight champion, of course, is Brazil, 20,000 bites per year, 100 to 150 deaths. But you know what? The heavyweight champion of them all is, of course, India. And look at the statistics, 200,000 bites per year and 40,000 deaths. And believe me, you may find it difficult, but believe me, this is a kind of underestimation. I think it is much more than this. And when you look at overall picture, not just snake bites, all the other envenomings, suppose you include here all the other toxic envenomations, you can imagine what kind of figure India really has. And that is why it's so important that we concentrate a lot on issues like these in India, aside from the usual things that we learn about, the diseases, the afflictions, the trauma, and things like that. Please do not neglect toxicology. Please do not neglect something like snake bite. So many of our countrymen dying. And yet, at the same time, though it may sound like a contradiction, snakes are not really our enemies. So we'll come to those things later. But let's now look at myth number 3. Non-venomous snakes are harmless. That is really a no-brainer, isn't it? I'm sure some of you must be laughing already because some of the deadliest snakes are actually non-venomous. Examples like python, anaconda, boa constrictor immediately come to mind. And while anaconda and boa constrictor may not be all that common in India, python certainly is. And I'm showing you one image here. I hope all of you can see these slides and these images. I'm just going on changing them on the assumption that there is no problem. If there's any issue, please do let me know. You can interrupt the lecture. You can unmute yourself and let me know. I hope you can see this specimen on the slide. This is the Indian reticulated python. It is seen in some forest regions and some mountainous areas, but not really commonly encountered. And whether you believe it or not, even though it is capable of killing a human, hardly any case of human fatality has been recorded because of a python strike. And of course, the method of killing is same in all non-venomous snakes. They don't have venom, so naturally they don't inject any venom. They just wind or coil their body around the person or the victim or the prey and crush the person or the animal to death in a process of asphyxiation. So that's about non-venomous snakes. And we will move on to, this is the boa constrictor, which is not encountered commonly in India. And if you want to know all about anaconda, watch this film. Classic, Anaconda. I'm joking. It's a terrible film. You shouldn't watch it. It tells you everything that is wrong about anaconda. The only thing good about this film, you know what, is what you're looking at, the poster. Look at that tagline. When you can't breathe, you can't scream. Oh, fantastic. I wonder who came up with
Sir,
that.
slide is not changing now.
What slide are you seeing now, Pratik?
And now it changed to Anaconda slide, sir. Till now it was the previous slide only it was showing. Now it changed to Anaconda.
I think I'm faster than the internet. the internet speed is slow. What to do? I'm really sorry for that, Pratik, but I'm happy.
Now we are on Anaconda slide, sir. Now we are on Anaconda slide.
Okay. If there's any issue like that, if there's a time lag, please let me know so that I'll slow down.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Yeah. Thanks. So I was talking about this poster. The poster is quite impressive. And I like the tagline a lot. When you can't breathe, you can't scream, though it is actually borrowed from another, poster. I don't know whether you have seen that film. It's called Alien. Was released somewhere in the late 1970s. It was a fantastic trailer. It was a fantastic film. And it had a fantastic tagline. And that was, in space, no one can hear you scream. So they took that and modified that a little bit and put it here on this, poster of Anaconda. When you can't breathe, you can't scream. I agree with that. There's also something very small. I don't know whether you can read it. Under the main title, Anaconda, there's something mentioned there. It will take your breath away. Really? I think that's all that you need to know about this film. If you have seen it, please forget about what they have said about Anaconda in the film. If you haven't seen the film, please don't see it. So Anaconda is shown here. I hope this slide has changed. If it is not changing, please let me know. And if it is not changing, please give it a bit of time. I'm sure, because of the time lag, it may take a little bit of extra time. This anaconda, as you can see, is basking, in the sunlight on a rock, very quiet, very docile, not harming anybody. And that's how we should leave, snakes alone. Snakes want to be left alone. Don't provoke them. Don't play with them. Don't kill them. Of course, you shouldn't be killing them because snakes are very valuable to our environment, very valuable for ecology. And snakes, as we all know, kill rodents like rats. And rats, if they flourish, in the world, our crops will be damaged and will starve to death. So you kill snake, it's like cutting your own nose to spite your own face. It is as terrible as that. And look at these people, look at them holding up this mother of a specimen of anaconda like a trophy. How terrible. You shouldn't be doing this. This is cruelty. And ironically, I can see some people who look like, they're forest rangers or something, or maybe wildlife, some personnel. And I do hope they have not harmed the snake and let it back into the wild, but even this should not be shown. Snakes are not trophies. All right, we will move on to myth number 4, and that is the most venomous snake in the world is the king cobra. I would really like to believe that because king cobra is found in India. And that is one piece of statistic that I would be proud of. But unfortunately, as obvious, it's a myth, and it is the fact is like this: the king cobra is certainly the largest venomous snake in the world, but that does not translate into the most venomous snake in the world. It is not the most venomous. The most venomous has got actually a slightly underwhelming name. It's called small scale snake, otherwise called the inland taipan, seen in Australia. And this is then followed by other snakes in this order of decreasing lethality. Coastal taipan, also seen in Australia. Tiger snake, also seen in Australia. So Australia takes all 3 top spots. Number 1 to 3 are Australian snakes. India is nowhere in the picture right now. Let's look at number 4. Beaked sea snake, found in Indian Ocean? Not at all. It's found in the Pacific Ocean. So that's also out. Then you have death adder, found in some parts of Europe, not India. Common krait, the first Indian species comes here. Common krait. It's not the king cobra. And if you look at the list, the first, snake, Indian snake to feature in this list is outside the top 5. We are not even there in the top 5. This is number 6, followed by common cobra, otherwise called Indian cobra. These 2 snakes definitely quite common in India. Then you have black snake, not seen in India. Russell's viper, very common, especially in states like Kerala for sure. I think to some extent Karnataka also, though I forget as to whether that is so or not. Pratik can correct me later at the end of the lecture. But I think Russell's viper is among the commonest, venomous snakes in most parts of the country. Followed by saw scale viper, also seen in India. Followed by king cobra. The king cobra, is outside the top 10, as you can see. It's number 11. So it's nowhere near the most venomous snake in the world. This is the rattlesnake, found in the US, not in India. No rattlesnakes in India. And pit viper, a number of pit vipers in India. So in this list, I hope you can see this list. I hope you can see the slide. You can find out for yourself as to where Indian snakes stand as far as potency of venom is concerned. Please remember this very important point. Common krait or Indian krait is the most venomous Indian snake. It is not cobra, it is not viper, and of course it is not the king cobra. It is a common krait or Indian krait. This is an image to show you the small scale snake or the inland taipan. This is its cousin, the other taipan, coastal taipan. Both of them very venomous, both of them not seen in India. Both of them are Australian snakes. All right, we will move on to myth number 5. And you can see this kind of ferocious picture that is often, highlighted in media and films and all that. Snakes attack without provocation. The picture is literally screaming at you. And is that true? Of course not. It is yet another sad myth. Snakes are not at all aggressive. They are, in fact, terrified of humans. They don't like humans. And can you blame them? I mean, I don't like humans very much myself. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Not at all. But it is a fact that snakes don't like humans. Humans are not their prey. They, in fact, view humans as predators. And moment they come across a human being, the first instinct of the snake is to flee from the scene. So do give it a chance. Don't, make any kind of aggressive movement that may be perceived by the snake, as a kind of provocative gesture. Just remain calm. Don't look the snake right in the eye if it is facing you. Just look a little bit sidewards and keep the snake in your field of vision and try and back away from the snake as slowly as possible. And believe me, the snake itself will escape from you. You don't have to attack. And if you do, believe me, the snake can attack much more efficiently. You shouldn't be doing that. Moving on to myth number 6. Snakes are fond of milk. So give them a bottle of milk every day. A healthy snake is a nice snake and it will be very grateful to you. All absolutely rubbish. I was just joking. Snakes do not like milk at all for the simple reason they cannot drink. Because you see, their tongue, the tongue that you can see in this image, tongue is forked. It is not adapted for lapping. The tongue is actually a sense organ in the snake, helps to locate prey, does not help in lapping up anything. Don't give anything by way of liquids to snakes. Don't try to force something down its throat. And all those kinds of things that people say that we leave behind a saucer of milk near where a snake resides overnight, and in the morning the milk is gone, which is proof that the snake must have lapped it up, is all nonsense. It must be some other creature that must have lapped it up in the night. Who knows? It may have been even a passing hungry human being, for all we know. But the fact remains, snakes do not like milk. And when you are in India, at least once upon a time, this was a common sight in many places, isn't it? A snake charmer with his peculiar kind of musical implement and a snake coming out of a basket and appearing to sway and dance in tune with the music that he's playing. Snakes are fond of music. The kind of music that they are fond of, depends on the snake. Some snakes like classical music. Some like, Bollywood music, some like rock music or heavy metal or acid rock. It depends on the snake. Of course, I'm joking again. Snakes don't like music for the simple reason they don't possess auditory apparatus. They can't hear. Snakes just can't hear anything. They live by, sense of vibration. And that is why it's important to remember this. When you are in a snake infested area, you walk with a heavy step, heavy tread, which will vibrate, the ground. And when that ground starts vibrating, if a snake is in the vicinity, it will move away from your path. And that is one of the, mechanisms of avoiding a snake bite attack that you should remember. And that is, if you're in a snake infested area, and especially if it is dark, walk with a heavy step and allow the snake to move out of your path. All right, that I think takes care of all the myths. There is this kind of a myth. I don't know whether it's a myth or whether it is true, whether it's an apocryphal story or a true story. I'm not very sure. This famous queen, Cleopatra, is supposed to have committed suicide by having a snake bite her. Really? I don't know. What a terrible way of committing suicide. This is a famous image, a painting that shows poor Cleopatra lying dead. I can't see the snake, however. But the peculiar thing is there's another woman lying, sprawled over the bed, and she also appears to be dead. No one is talking about her. Everybody talks about Cleopatra, but then that, I think, can be understood because she was a queen. I really don't know whether this story is true or part of legend. I have the feeling maybe it is a myth, though I will not discount the probability that it could be fact also. So we will leave it at that. Not very important anyhow in modern times. we will move on to the other myths. Very important, isn't it, to identify a snake that has been killed by a bystander and brought along with a bitten victim. You have to find out which snake exactly killed the victim so that you can tailor the treatment according to that. All absolute and total hogwash, rubbish. You shouldn't be identifying a snake at all for the simple reason there is only one treatment for snake bite, venomous snake bite in India, and that is a polyvalent antivenom, which takes care of the so-called big four. I'm sure all of you know it. Common cobra, common krait, Russell's viper, saw-scale viper. These are the four snakes. You don't have an antivenom for any other snake. So there's no point in trying to identify which snake it is. Moment you see signs of envenomation, go ahead and give the antivenom and hope that it works. If it doesn't work after 20 or 30 vials at the most, stop it. Just depend on the clinical picture. And once the patient is improving with antivenom, fine, you continue to a maximum of about 30 vials. And if there is no difference to what is happening to the victim, then go by supportive measures and go by symptomatic measures. You can actually stop the antivenom. This slide is very important for doctors, for medical students, because it shows you how many dangerous myths are associated with treatment of snake bite, right from first aid measures. So let's look at what is advocated and what actually should not be advocated. First aid measures, verbal reassurance. I absolutely and completely stand by this. This is maybe one of the best things you should be doing when you are a bystander and somebody near you has been bitten by a snake. Even if you are sure that it's a venomous snake, be a very good liar and convince the victim that it is not a venomous snake. You know it. You are an expert. You have come across cases like this. Don't worry. Nothing's going to happen. It's a non-venomous snake. I call this verbal anesthesia. And believe me, it works. If you try and allay the anxiety of somebody who's been bitten because of this widespread notion, moment you're bitten by a snake, your time is, now limited as far as your survival is concerned, you're going to die. It's very important to dispel all those kinds of fears, because sometimes the fear can be so much that it kills the victim. The victim can die of what we refer to as neurogenic shock from the fact that he feels he has been bitten by a venomous snake and he's going to die. So first aid measures, verbal reassurance, absolutely. You should be following it. Am I audible? Somebody is playing some music in the background. Or is that?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yes. Shall I continue?
Yes, sir.
Fine. And the slide is also visible, Pratik?
Yes, sir, it's visible, sir.
Excellent. So we will move on to the next under first aid measures. Next measure, immobilization. Moment somebody is bitten by a snake, as far as possible, let him not move. Let him not move his limb, especially, most particularly that limb which has been bitten. Because the more you move, the more circulation will be stimulated and the more the chances of the venom reaching all parts of the body very fast. That's the idea behind immobilization. As to whether you should be splinting or whether you should apply a compression bandage, that is left to your discretion, your judgment. If you are fairly sure it's not a hemotoxic snake, not a viper, then maybe you can consider bandaging. But if it's a viper, you should think twice, because local manifestations are going to start very quickly. The limb is going to start swelling up. There can be bleeding from the bite side, all kinds of things which can be aggravated, exacerbated by splinting and compression bandage. So that's optional, but immobilization, yes, I agree totally and completely should be done. Beverages. Often it's advocated, give the person some tea or coffee, let him be awake. The moment he closes his eyes, he's gone. Not at all true. Don't give any beverages. Not tea, not coffee, not alcohol at any cost. So these things don't work. In fact, sometimes they can provoke vomiting. And vomiting is actually taken to be a sign of envenomation, can confuse the picture. So no beverages. And what about this? Tourniquet, very widely advocated, very, very widely practiced also, unfortunately. We are talking about a ligature. that is said to be helpful if applied proximate to the bite site. It is said to impede the circulation of venom from the bitten area to the rest of the body, but there are really no scientific studies to document such efficacy. And today's recommendations actually, as far as possible, do not tie a tourniquet. Tourniquet can be very dangerous. Look at this picture of some. I'll show you that picture in a while. But these are the complications of tourniquet, especially when applied very tight. Congestion and swelling, beyond the ligature, ischemia and gangrene, damage to peripheral nerves, increased bleeding from bite site, all kinds of issues. And on top of it, there is not enough evidence to show benefit. There are just not enough studies to say that application of tourniquet really works. The theoretical basis is all right, but practical evidence is lacking. As a result of which, when you weigh the pros and cons, the current recommendation is do not apply a tourniquet. And what about this? Incision and suction. Also widely advocated. Many books mention this also. Moment somebody is bitten, aside from application of a tourniquet, take hold of whatever is sharp implement close by, even if it's a rusted knife or blade or whatever it is, and cut as much as you can through the bite side and start sucking away to glory. All this is outdated, obsolete. You should not be incising, you should not be sucking, because they just don't work. On the other hand, you may be, causing great damage. I'll show you the complications of incision and suction. Also, look at this picture sent by a doctor to me. It is his case, somebody who's been brought with an alleged, history of snake bite. And this tourniquet, look at how tight it is. And by the time it was released, I believe it was found that that limb was gangrenous. Poor person's limb had to be amputated. And the real tragedy was that finally it was, deduced that the snake which bit him was non-venomous. How do you like that? He lost a limb, and for what? For a non-venomous bite. This is just one example of how dangerous application of tourniquets can be. Complications can result in loss of limb, sometimes life, and finally you find out the snake was not even venomous. So incision suction complications are these: bleeding, damage to nerves, blood vessels, tendons, infection. Moving on, another widespread myth: cryotherapy, application of ice or cold to the bite site can impede.
Sir, yes? Sir, sorry to interrupt. Actually, slides got stuck again. It is showing the treatment of snake bite. It is not moved after that.
I'm really sorry that this is happening. Is it moving at least now?
Sir, it's
yes. Yes, sir.
It's working for us.
Where has it moved to?
Okay. Okay, fine. Sir, I think it's...
Is it at cryotherapy?
Yes, sir. It's at cryotherapy now.
Okay, otherwise I have to start crying. I'm just joking. Because, this is something beyond me. The speed is unfortunately not good enough here. And I think this will periodically happen. I would appreciate it whenever, the slide gets stuck. Please do let me know so that I can wait until it starts moving again. And if it really fails to move at all, then I'll have to go back to plan B, the other presentation without animations. So anyway, we'll continue.
Sir, I think I just got a message from one student. I think it got stuck for me only.
Okay, right. So cryotherapy refers to, as I said just now, application of ice or cold, not to be done. Theoretically, that is, quite sound. When you apply something cold, it minimizes circulation. But here, the benefit is not clear. And if you really go and apply a lot of cold to the bite site, it can cause necrosis, which can, again cause problems. So moving on. Now my slide is not moving. Oh yeah, right. Drugs. There are any number of drugs that are advocated, but I would say that stick to only these drugs. Injection TT, yes, for every bite by any creature, injection TT has to be given, including for venomous and non-venomous snakes. Paracetamol, if there is pain, don't give aspirin or NSAIDs because they can increase bleeding tendency, and if it happens to be a viper which has bitten, it can exacerbate the clinical picture. And some drugs you can give if the patient is vomiting, some basic kinds of antiemetics. And if there is any sign of infection, you can give antibiotics. But if there is no sign of infection, no need of antibiotics also. Coming to current recommendations of first aid measures. I'll just show you this one slide because it's so important for all medical students, for all doctors to remember. This is a WHO slogan. It is a very simple slogan. It is do it right. And right is a mnemonic. It's an acronym. It's an abbreviation that can be read off like a word because each letter, virtually each letter, stands for a word. R for reassurance. I for immobilization, preferably without compression, or even if you're indulging in compression, do it judiciously, cautiously. And then you have get to hospital and tell the doctor the remaining letters. Do it right. This is all that is recommended today. The key is reassurance and immobilization, and also getting the patient to the nearest hospital as fast as possible without making him move himself as much as possible. Whatever is possible in the circumstances, please do it. Get him to the hospital, observe what is happening all the time, and tell the whole thing to the doctor so that he gets a clear enough idea as to whether envenomation is happening and as to whether it's progressing, whether he should be giving antivenom or not. And I'm giving you on this slide a kind of a thumb rule for how you should proceed in the hospital if it's a snake bite. After the first aid, kind of stage is over, every case of alleged snake bite, like a case of head injury, must be admitted and observed for 24 hours, during which you should perform these, investigations, monitor these things which are there on the slide. And only when you see any of these manifestations listed on this slide should you be giving antivenom. Only when you see one of these. If you don't see any of these, do not start antivenom. Even if it's a venomous snake, you're fairly sure, do not. Because sometimes a venomous snake inflicts a non-venomous bite. We call that a dry bite. Venom is not injected. Because I told you, snakes, don't want to attack humans. They don't want to waste venom on a human. So a snake may deliberately not inject venom, just bite and then try and escape. So that is one possibility. Or sometimes even if venom is injected, it may not be, efficient enough. Much of it may have leaked outside. Any number of reasons why, even in the case of venomous snake bite, envenomation may not happen. So look for these signs. If you find any of these, don't delay. Give the antivenom. And on this slide, I'm giving you a very kind of quick guide as to how to administer antivenom, right from test dose. Do you have to give a test dose? Find out whether he's going to suffer a reaction, because antivenom is prone for anaphylactic shock in some individuals. Unfortunately, a test dose does not work in the case of antivenom, because you see the anaphylactoid reaction that you see in the case of antivenom administration is not IgE mediated, but it is complement activated. And therefore, there is no predictive value. Only when a particular anaphylactoid reaction is mediated by IgE will a test dose work. But if it is mediated by complement activation, it will not work. And in the case of antivenom, it is complement activation. So that is why all you have to do is find out whether it is envenomation or not. If it is minimal, you see for these features, give 50 ml. That is 5 vials. Each vial is 10 ml. Moderate envenomation with these features, give 10 vials. And severe envenomation with these kinds of features, give 15 vials. You can repeat that once more. Maximum 30 vials. Do not exceed 30 vials. It does not work. Don't go on wasting antivenom. Antivenom is precious. We should not be wasting it as far as possible. 300 ml is supposed to be the ultimate maximum. And look at this. Look at this, sad, kind of beliefs which result in snakes being killed, including venomous snakes. And the snake venom, is extracted sometimes from living snakes, very terribly tortured, all because of this mistaken belief that snake venom has got aphrodisiac or efferent properties, and sometimes used by, youth in rave parties and all that. Each dose, of this snake venom is said to range from 4,000 to 5,000 rupees, maybe more. And sometime back, 2012, 1 liter when was seized in Maharashtra, snake venom, the value of that consignment was said to be 1.12 crores. maybe 2 crores now. All for what? For a mistaken belief that snake venom is aphrodisiac. And is it? It's absolutely not. Look at this man. He was arrested 2017, multiple addictions, including, he says, snake venom addiction. These are all terrible, kinds of things. And we must, as doctors, make sure that these myths are all dispelled. All right, in the time available, we will run through very quickly the remaining venomous creatures. I will not be taking much, time, because I know the time is running out. It is, I think, 10:40 or so. So in the next 5 or 10 minutes, I'll wind up. But let's very quickly look at some of the myths associated with, for instance, insect bites and stings. And when you talk of insect bites and stings, the most common, the most important are the bees and the wasps. Often people think that both of them, when they sting, virtually the same kind of effects, the same kind of manifestations, the same kind of treatment. Not really correct. If you can differentiate the two, that will be nice. If you can't, don't, go to all kinds of, extreme lengths to find out. Not all that important. But yes, there are some differences between bee sting and wasp sting. The most important of which is related to the stinger. This is the bee stinger. As you can see, it is barbed. You can see the barbs here on the stinger. And when the bee inserts this stinger, it is unable to extract it again, extricate it from the tissues because of this barbed nature. And as a result of which, when it, very desperately tries to remove the stinger, the whole apparatus gets disengaged from the bee and it gets, in fact, eviscerated and it dies. And that is why, generally speaking, bees sting only once. It's not a hard and fast rule. Sometimes bees do manage to sting multiple times, but much of the time, because of the barbed nature of the stinger, bees can sting only once and the stinger gets retained in tissue. So when you're looking at a patient with an alleged bee sting, do try and locate the stinger, because otherwise it keeps, injecting venom into the tissue since it is connected to the venom sac. And if you find the stinger, just gently scrape it off. No such problem with regard to a wasp sting, because the stinger is, as you can see here, smooth. It is not barbed. So the wasp can sting repeatedly. It can easily insert, reinsert, withdraw the stinger from the tissues without any problem, because the stinger is not barbed. With regard to venom, not much of difference, though if you really want to know, the wasp venom is actually a little bit more dangerous than the bee venom. Bee venom is more dangerous because of the anaphylactic reactions that, are quite common with bee stings. All right, moving on to Spanish fly. Again, a lot is, said about this. It's supposed to be a very important, kind of thing in the examination. I really don't know why. Number one, it is not even a fly. It's a beetle. It cannot fly at all. The scientific name is Cantharis vesicatoria. This is an illustration of that particular beetle, and this is an actual photograph. I hope the slides are moving and you can see this brilliant kind of picture. Look at how wonderful this beetle is. Look at the glistening kind of green color, and look at how it's camouflaging itself on the green background. The harmless creature doesn't bother anybody, and what do humans do? They go about killing it. They go about killing it for the same stupid reason that sometimes snakes are killed, to extract the venom, because it's believed that this Spanish fly, when it's killed, dried and consumed, it's an aphrodisiac. The active principle is cantharidin, and this is what you get sometimes on the net. This is, I picked up from the net. Spanish fly, hot cherry, sex liquid, really absolute nonsense. So I assume by now you know what exactly is an aphrodisiac. In case you don't, I'm just showing you this slide very quickly. Aphrodisiac, derived from Aphrodite, Greek goddess of love, beauty, and desire. And this is a sculpture of that goddess. And these are the substances that are supposed to have aphrodisiac properties. In other words, those which can stimulate sexual desire. But believe me, there is no such magic bullet that can stimulate somebody's sexual desire just like that. And some of these may work to some extent. Some of these absolutely don't work. The last two mentioned, chocolate and alcohol, I don't think so. There's a lot of myth associated with that. We'll not go into it because that is not the topic for discussion. So Spanish fly, this is what you get for believing that it's an aphrodisiac. You hunt for pleasure, you get this terrible pain. not just pain, it can result in death. And that is why we must, as doctors, really make it clear that these are all obsolete concepts, these are all dangerous concepts and must not be believed in. Finally, we will wind up with some other creatures. Like, for instance, this particular creature. Look at this beauty. Look at this absolute beauty. It looks like some prehistoric monster, isn't it, from Jurassic Park? And believe me, it is from that era. It is a prehistoric creature. It has survived millions of years, not like humans. It's much older than humans. This is a lizard. This is a garden lizard found in, gardens. And is it venomous? People kill such lizards. No lizard in India is venomous. Please don't kill lizards. Lizards are also very useful to us. Many lizards, in fact, eat up mosquitoes, which are much more of a pestilent creature, isn't it? Look at this. This is a domestic lizard, what we call a gecko. We find, in almost every home. Sometimes it falls into food, and then people think they're getting poison. Not at all. Even if it falls in food and you consume, that food, nothing is going to happen. And all you can say is that you have had some non-vegetarian food. Joking again. Yes. The only venomous lizards are these in the world. One is a Gila monster. It's pronounced Gila, though it's spelt with a G, it's pronounced as H. Gila monster, this is one example I'm showing you here. I'm proud to say this is taken by me. You can see how perfect the photograph is. I took it in the Australian, Melbourne Zoo when I was there. And the relative is a Mexican bearded lizard. This is a picture of that. And this is not taken by me, so you can see the difference. This is not as clear as the one before. Both are virtually, as you can see, similar looking. Mexican bearded lizard as well as, Gila monsters seen in desert parts of the US and Mexico and places like that, not seen in India. They can be, considered venomous, but actually they don't bite as far as possible. We do encounter this lizard in India, the monitor lizard, not venomous. Please don't kill it. Poor thing. It's sometimes, slaughtered unnecessarily for all kinds of reasons. And look at this mother of a lizard. Look at this. This is a Komodo dragon. This is perhaps venomous, but the more important thing is its size. And don't worry, it's not seen in India. It's not seen in most parts of the world. It's seen only in some Indonesian islands. And it's a big tourist attraction in those islands. Komodo dragon is perhaps one of the huge lizards that can be pretty dangerous to humans, even though human fatalities are not all that common. So I'm very happy that I'm coming to the end of my lecture, right on time, I think. This is 10 minutes to 11 as per my watch, and I believe that is right. So we will end with this rhetorical question. Most venomous creature in the world, which is it? When this is asked, students come up with all kinds of answers, but they just don't come up with the right answer, and that is this. This is the most venomous creature in the world. I'm sure if you are looking at the image, you recognize which creature this is. This is a human being. And the strange thing about this creature is that there is no venom. Really speaking, no venom injection mechanism, no venom gland, and yet it happens to be the most venomous creature. Please excuse me for a little bit of black humor like this. I'm not really serious, of course. Humans can be venomous in other ways, but definitely not by biting and injecting venom. Even if some human bites, that's all right. But it can be sometimes taken as a love bite. So all you have to bother about is whether you get infected or not, but definitely not. You don't have to worry about venom. And yes, please do watch this film if you can. It's a classic. It's called Long Weekend. It shows you the other side of Mother Nature as to, when you play with it, when you, do some harm to Mother Nature, as to how it can sometimes strike back. It's an Australian film, though this is actually an American remake. The original Australian film in 1970s. So I close my presentation with this, expression of thanks and gratitude to Dr. Pratik and his team from KMC Mangalore and the administrators of the college. And thank you all those who have been listening for patiently listening to this lecture. And yes, keep rocking. Forensic medicine and toxicology, absolutely, I think, fascinating subjects, both of them. You should just get into the depth of the subject and you will know as to how very interesting it is. Sometimes you will not be able to put your book down. That is how it is different from some of the other subjects in the medical curriculum. So thank you all very much. And it's been a pleasure to have interacted, or at least a kind of monologue that I've been making. It's been a pleasure. And if there's any question, suggestion, criticism, or whatever comments, if students can hear me, and if they can unmute themselves, they can feel free to ask. Of course, permission from the HOD is necessary.
Thank you, sir. Before we move on to students, if they have any question, we have our additional dean, Dr. Alfred Augustine, with us here. Alfred, sir, would you like to say something here, sir? Our guest speaker have finished the talk. So
thank you, Pratik, and thank you very much, sir. That was a wonderful talk. I was really happy to listen to this. I learnt a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much,
curious.
sir.
I was very curious. So when Pratik told me that you will be speaking, I told him that I would like to attend.
Sir.
Essentially because I've had a few close encounters, and so I wanted to be better informed.
Okay,
so
sir.
Thank you so much. Very enlightening talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir, for your words.
Thanks a lot, sir. Now, if any of the students have any query to put it up to Dr. Pillai, can the student can unmute themselves and please ask the question if there is anything.
So, excuse me, sir.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, sir. I have a question. Sir, you said that cryotherapy should not be used because it can cause necrosis. Is it applicable only for the hemotoxic snakes or the myotoxic and neuro ones as well?
In general, all kinds of venomous bite. As far as possible, do not apply ice or cold, because there's a tendency. I'm not saying that it will lead to necrosis. I'm not being dogmatic here, but yes, the possibility is there. You may increase the chances, especially if it's a kind of envenomation that causes local necrosis. See, both hemotoxic as well as neurotoxic snakes can cause local necrosis. That's a problem. In fact, much of the snake envenomation we come across in India, there is usually a local necrosis. The only kind of venomous snake that not much local necrosis happens is the crate bite, but then it's better not to take any chances.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Any other questions? That was a pertinent question. Anybody else would like to ask, or maybe even make any comment or suggestion, or maybe add on to what has been spoken?
So there is a question which one of the student has typed on chat. Is it possible to develop tolerance to snake venom on repeated exposure? There have been instances of a man biting back the snake and the snake dying. So one of the student has put up this query.
That is a very, I think, strange kind of question. Somebody, a human being biting a snake and the snake dying. Yeah, fine. Such anecdotes I have also come across. It's a very relevant question, however, actually, even though it's a question that normally I don't come across. It's a relevant question because, see, for instance, I'm working here in Kerala, which has got a long coastline. And Cochin, where I'm working, also has got a coastline. We have a lot of sea snakes, and fishermen often get bitten also by sea snakes. And we find that almost none of them really, get seriously envenomed. Much of the time, the fisherman who gets bitten does not even bother to come to hospital. He just, picks up the snake and throws it back into the sea. He doesn't even kill it. And if the sea snake is caught in his net, he'll pluck it out from among the fish and throw it back in the sea. And very rarely do we come across fishermen being seriously envenomed by sea snake bite. So maybe there is something that we need to study here as to whether over a period of time, because of constant exposure to these kinds of creatures, there can be immunity developing. We don't know for sure. I for one, really don't know. But I will not exclude that possibility.
I think Dr. Jagdish have a query or something to say. Dr. Jagdish.
Sure.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Dr. Jagdish.
Sir, it was a very fantastic talk, sir. And
Thank
it
you.
was very enlightening too. And I have few questions regarding autopsies considered with snake bite poisoning.
Sure.
So usually what we do is the main objective is to find out the cause of death. So what are we more contributing when in case of snake bite poisoning we're doing an autopsy?
It's a very, I think, complex kind of question, and the answer is not straightforward. It's a question that has troubled, us all in the forensic, fraternity. Case of snakebite fatality or alleged, snakebite fatality, autopsy. What do we look for? How do we find out, whether it is really due to snakebite? Could it be something else? The thing is, what I would suggest, just look at the history, get the complete history, and if there is, hospital case records, get all of that also. Try to find out what kind of snake could have bitten, and then what kind of features you should be expecting in the dead body. If you find all the features that you expect in the dead body, that can be seen in a dead body, then I think there is no harm in saying consistent with a snake bite. Fatality is consistent. And especially if you don't come across anything else in the dead body that has contributed to the death, maybe you can write something like that. But in any case, I think we should not be absolutely dogmatic and say that the cause of death is due to snake bite, even if you find fang marks, even if you find, features of envenomation in the form of, some dairy matters, tissues or organs and things like that. I think we should be very careful how we frame the cause of death. And autopsy is of limited utility actually in a case of snakebite fatality, except for saying that it could be consistent, it may not be consistent, and of course for ruling out other causes of death. I think that's all that we can do as far as autopsy is concerned.
Sir, one more question.
Sir,
Yeah, sure.
Sir, what is the purpose of preserving routine viscera in case of snakebite poisoning, which the IO usually insists us to preserve it?
Yes, absolutely true, and absolutely useless. We should not be preserving viscera at all. I mean, what is the purpose? Sometimes we get queries like this, from police officers, or maybe sometimes even from our forensic colleagues in Kerala, and say that, can you do this kind of analysis? The chemical examiners laboratory is saying that we can't do anything much about it. Nobody can, because snake venom is a very complex kind of mixture, and there is no kind of chemical test anyhow to find out. All we can do is immunological testing, and many of the forensic science laboratories or chemical examiners laboratories don't have the provision for that. And how can you go on testing, for different kinds of snakes, different kinds of immunological, components? It's really not possible. I feel that that is one aspect that should be highlighted, and that is viscera analysis in a case of alleged snake bite is practically of no value.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, Alfred sir, I think sir have a comment. Alfred sir.
Any other comments? Any other questions?
Sir, there is a comment mentioned by one of our... Yes, sir.
Sir, I would just like some information about a jellyfish sting. I have actually suffered a jellyfish sting, and I want to know whether it's actually possible on our Indian western coastline, because I was stung and I was told it's jellyfish. I had 2 long welts over my back, maybe about 15 centimeters each, maybe 2 or 3 of those long welts, and I was told that it looks like a jellyfish sting, and it really hit me for about 2 days. So I'm wondering, is that possible in our coastline, or this was something else?
That's a very interesting question, sir. Actually, yes. I believe that there are jellyfish species in Indian waters also. Only thing is, we don't find that kind of venomous jellyfish that we come across in some other kinds of waters. Like, for instance, the Australian, the coastline, or maybe the Pacific, ocean, and where we have what is called the box jellyfish. There's a species, I don't remember the scientific name, I think is some Flexneri, Chilonex flexneri or something. That's called the box jellyfish, which is very, very venomous. And I think if somebody is unfortunate to get stung by that, virtually lethal, extremely painful and lethal. But I think the kind of jellyfish that is found in other kinds of waters, including, I think, Indian waters, not all that venomous, can cause problems, I think, like what you face, sir. But I don't think it causes mortality. Certainly, we cannot rule out, jellyfish in Indian waters. May not be all that common and may not be lethal.
Okay, looks like I got away lightly then.
Sir, yes, sir. Yes, absolutely.
Sir, there is a comment by one of our students. It says that the reason some countries are snake free, as mentioned by you on the slide, is because probably the regions are geographically isolated or the temperatures in these regions is very low. Just is put up one of the possible reasons for that. Then
Okay.
there is another query, sir. Why so many bites in India? I couldn't get I think he wants to know why the number of snake bite cases are so much in India.
Yes, that's again an important question. It's a question that
Yes,
should
sir.
trouble all of us. The number of bites are so high, probably because the number of snakes in India pretty high, and many of them, of course, are venomous, though not really lethal all the time. India is a country rich in flora and fauna, we know that, and several parts of the country, especially with thick forestation and all that, and even desert areas, you have snakes peculiar to that kind of thing. We have a long coastline also, plenty of sea snakes. So India is a country with a plenty of snakes, not just snakes, plenty of all kinds of creatures. So that is certainly one. The second is, people generally don't take precautions that they should be taking in high risk occupations, like for instance in farming and all that, or in crop culture, where you have to harvest crops and you don't take precautions. Much of the snake bites that we come across is actually in situations like that. Or even in the industrial sector, if we don't take any precautions with regard to snake infested areas like it is done in the West. So we need to create awareness that there are some situations where we need to be careful. The possibility of snakes exist, and ours is a snake-rich country, so we need to take precautions. As far as the mortality is concerned, that is directly related to, unfortunately, our inability to really come up with effective kind of management protocols. That needs to change. I would like to take this opportunity of telling everybody that there is what is called National Snakebite Management Protocol, issued by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. It's available online. Please do go through it. And that is a protocol that all doctors should be following.
Sir, there is one last question by one of the student. After that, we'll close it up.
Sure.
Is asking, is Bengal monitor poisonous?
No, none of the monitor lizards are poisonous. I would use the I would use the term venomous instead of poisonous, because when you say poisonous, it is something that that should cause problems on consumption. Whereas venomous is very specific to a creature that is capable of biting or stinging. And when we are talking of lizards and reptiles, like snakes and all that, we are talking much of the time about biting. So you ask me as to whether Bengal monitor or any other kind of monitor lizard is venomous. I don't think so. That is my knowledge. As far as my knowledge goes, and I've got this information from very credible, kind of sources. There are no lizards in India that can be considered venomous.
Okay, sir. Thanks a lot, sir, for a very enlightening lecture. I'll request if anyone has any query or anything to say, my department colleagues or Alfred, sir, anyone has any point to make? Otherwise, we'll close this session now. The
Sure.
students might be having the next class.
I know.
So,
Thank you, sir, for the excellent presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all very much. Yeah, it's been
Dr.
it's been a
Suresh.
pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much, sir, for your excellent presentation.
Thank you, Suresh. Yeah. Goodbye. Have a nice day. Stay
Bye,
safe.
bye.
Stay
okay,
secure.
sir.
Bye, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye. Goodbye.
Thank you, sir.